Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World Panorama, the only show that gives you a 360-degree view of major global news. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Concerns mount as Japan-China island dispute shows no signs of easing. US says Japan-China must resolve dispute peacefully. After an objectionable film, now cartoons mocking Prophet Muhammad spark protests in the Muslim world. Protests against Sri Lankan president's visit in Chennai, Madhya Pradesh. Rajapaksa discusses ways to end attacks on Sri Lankans with the Prime Minister. And in sports, FIFA and Brazilian star Ronaldo unveils the armadillo as the mascot of Brazilian edition of the Football World Cup 2014. And straight to the story in focus this week. The year that was supposed to be the friendship year of Japan-China people-to-people exchanges, marking 40 years of diplomatic ties between the World War II enemies, has instead turned into a deepening dislike, even hatred, over ownership of a clutch of islands in East China Sea. The island dispute has triggered mass demonstrations in 80 cities across China against the decision of the Japanese government to buy the disputed islands from a Japanese businessman. Various Japanese multinationals such as Canon and Panasonic have closed down their factories in China. We will be discussing more on the situation in East Asia with respect to this dispute over the next few minutes. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome Professor B.R. Deepak from the Center of Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies on the show. So welcome. Before we engage him into that discussion, here's a look at this report.
Anti-Japan protests reignited across China on 18 September, the emotional anniversary marking Tokyo's occupation of its giant neighbor, escalating a maritime dispute. Relations between Asia's two biggest economies faltered, with emotions running high on the streets.
The Chinese government and the Chinese people will not allow the land of the country to be invaded. The illegal action of Japan purchasing the island is not acceptable and will not be allowed.
United Nations Secretary General urged China and Japan to resolve their territorial dispute through peaceful dialogue.
As a Secretary General, it's not for me to take a position on such territorial disputes. I urge all concerned parties to resolve the dispute peacefully through dialogue.
Soon after, Japan confirmed that Chinese surveillance vessels were still in waters around a group of islands. The United States, a key military ally of Japan, has called on the two sides to find a peaceful resolution to the disagreement, which is generating more and more unease in the region and starting to hurt economic links between the world's second and third largest economies.
Our purpose in being able to strengthen our presence in this region is to promote greater prosperity, to promote greater security in the Asia-Pacific region.
I want to make it clear that the Diaoyu Island have been China's inherited territory since ancient time, and we have sufficient historic and legal evidences to support that point.
Political analysts say China also upped the stakes last week when it announced precise boundaries for waters it claims around the islands, a move sure to raise pressure on Beijing to act when it accuses Japanese vessels of violating those boundaries.
Let's get in Professor B.R. Deepak into this talk. Sir, do you see the relations between Japan and China at their lowest points now with this dispute over these islands?
Yes, undoubtedly, they are at the lowest ebb, as you rightly said. In fact, since late 90s, to be precise, 1996, when both the sides, Chinese and Japanese, tried to, take measures or countermeasure to assert sovereignty over these small islands and reefs. People from Hong Kong, people from mainland China, and even Taiwan. So they landed for the first time, so there. In fact, the Japanese started it in 1996 to, put a lighthouse there, and then in 2004, some seven Hong Kong people. So they landed on the island, and they were detained by the Japanese and later, released. And this slowly, trying to simmer. But off late, especially in August and September this year, so this has heightened and worsened to a new level. Primarily starting from, Tokyo governor saying that, we would buy the land from the private owner of Senkaku. And that created a lot of, resentment and disappointment in China. And on 11th of September, this month, they have signed the agreement, and that again,
flared up tensions.
Flared up the tension. This is one aspect, and I think another aspect of this is that with these jingoistic, nationalistic feelings, rising high in both China and Japan, and the trade ties and whole sort of, relationship is really in bad shape, as you were pointing in your report, that many Japanese companies, they have closed down their businesses in China. Travel advisories, have been issued, and many tours, from China going to Japan have been cancelled, and there have been, huge demonstrations all over China, especially, coinciding with the 84th anniversary of, Mukden incident that happened on 20th September 1931.
We do know that both sides claim to have strong reasons, saying that these set of islands are ours, but tell us, why is it so important for these two nations? And also, there are a lot of disputes, various nations fighting each other over various pieces of lands in that area. But why is it so important for China and Japan to claim sovereignty and now?
Well, China and Japan, when they started to establish their diplomatic relations, so they were set aside. These disputes were all set aside. I think why these measures, or countermeasure to reassert sovereignty over these island and reefs. Primarily, I see there are two reasons. One is economic, economic reasons. Another is the strategic position of the island. Economic, because no one knew that there are huge, reserves of oil and natural gas under these islands. And it was only revealed by a UN report, back in 1969. And ever since, this is not only in the East China Sea, but also it applies to the South China Sea. That's why, a lot of countries, Philippines, Malaysia, even Taiwan, and Vietnam, where we have our stakes also, and so they are buying for the economic, benefit, or the you can say the energy security, if you use the new terminology. And secondly, I think strategically the position of these islands is extremely important, for both the countries, Japan as well as China. Why for Japan? One, it can totally, put embargo on the northern Taiwanese ports and harbors. And secondly, it can install all sort of like surveillance system and reconnaissance system, and also offshore anti-ship air-to-air missiles, and secondly, I think it could also be converted into a military base, by the Japanese or the Chinese, for that reasons. And other thing is that most of the East China establishment, especially Futou, Wenzhou, and Ningpo, these are very sensitive, coastal areas in the East China. They could be under the surveillance of or reconnaissance of Japan. In fact, if they...
So basically, this area is undoubtedly very, very important. It's not just pieces of rocks as being said about. There are reasons enough for China and Japan to fight over it.
Very valid reasons.
We have talked about the bigger picture, but it would only be understood better if we go deeper and know what exactly the cause of this dispute is. Let's have a look at this report.
The 8 uninhabited islands and rocks in question lie in the East China Sea. They have a total area of about 7 square kilometers and lie northeast of Taiwan, east of the Chinese mainland, and southwest of Japan's southernmost prefecture, Okinawa. Japan says it surveyed the islands for 10 years and determined that they are uninhabited. That being the case, on 14th of January 1895, it erected a sovereignty marker that formally incorporated the islands into Japanese territory. After World War II, Japan renounced claims to a number of territories and islands, including Taiwan in the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco. But under the treaty, the Nancy Shoto Islands came under US trusteeship and were then returned to Japan in 1971. Japan claims it was only years later in the 1970s, when the issue of oil resources in the area emerged, that Chinese and Taiwanese authorities began pressing their claims. China says that the Diaoyu Islands have been part of its territory since ancient times, serving as important fishing grounds administered by the province of Taiwan. The Senkaku Diaoyu issue highlights the more robust attitude China has been taking to its territorial claims in both the East China Sea and the South China Sea in recent months.
That was a sense of the history behind the dispute. But coming back to you, sir, do you think the latest visit by Leon Panetta was a reason that triggered Japan's actions and hence this, bigger sort of...
No, I think this is just one of the reasons. I think the U.S. presence as such, in Okinawa, so it is another reason. And moreover, the recent statement, emerging out of the White House that they are going to shift almost 60% of their assets, to Asia Pacific area, and this being of strategic importance. This is also, within those configurations, as the report already told that, between 1951 and 1971, these islands, they were under the trusteeship or under the governance of U.S. They were only, returned to Japan only in 1971. I think why U.S. would like to be here, I think one thing which I have in mind, maybe the Japanese, they would like U.S. to go out of Okinawa, maybe the Diaoyu, as the Chinese call them, or the Senkaku Island, it could be one of the areas, where they could hold on. And this is Chinese, counter argument that it is the Japanese who have, invited the U.S. in the region, and moreover, privately, so the U.S. has also accepted the sovereignty of these islands, and since it would like to play a major role, or increasing greater role in Asia. So from this point of view, I think their presence in the island is also very important.
All right, Professor Deepak, so the latest conflict between China and Japan, will it abate or not, which, it must, because of the great economic ties that the two nations share. It is, in fact, very crucial for them not to increase the tensions. Thank you so much for joining me on World Panorama this week and sharing your views
my pleasure.
with
Thank
us.
you.
Now we head in for a short break. Another twist in the US presidential elections, this time with a secret video being released. Details coming up in just a bit. You're watching World Panorama. A French satirical magazine on Wednesday published a series of cartoons mocking the Prophet Muhammad, setting off a new wave of outrage among Muslims and condemnation from French leaders amid widening unrest over an amateur video that has provoked violence throughout the Islamic world. Here are the details.
The decision by the French weekly Charlie Hebdo to print obscene cartoons depicting the Prophet came as fresh protests erupted in the Muslim world over an anti-Islam film.
So is it pertinent and intelligent in this context? We were discussing this earlier, to pour more oil on the fire? The answer is no. But we don't want to say to these people, we are infringing on your right to free expression. So there's a balance that has to be struck.
The French Prime Minister defended Charlie Hebdo's right to publish, but openly asked whether it had been acting responsibly.
We have a free press that can express itself right up to the point of caricature. But there is also a question of responsibility. And as far as public order is concerned, all the precautions will be taken with the Interior Ministry for order to be maintained.
The White House, in its first reaction, questioned the judgment of the French weekly. Worried that France might be targeted, the government ordered its embassies, cultural centers, schools and other official sites to close on Friday, the Muslim holy day in 20 countries. More than 30 people have been killed in the violent backlash over a 14-minute YouTube trailer for innocence of Muslims last week. In 2005, Danish cartoons of Muhammad Prophet sparked a wave of violent protests across the Muslim world that killed at least 50.
To the US elections now, amid a political row caused by Mitt Romney's controversial remarks that 47% of Americans looked themselves as victims, a new poll showed President Barack Obama leading his Republican challenger nationally by 5 points. Here's what's been happening in the US presidential contest.
US President Barack Obama rebuked Republican rival Mitt Romney, saying that anyone seeking to be president needs to work for all Americans. Making an appearance on David Letterman's chat show, Obama said Romney was wrong to describe 47% of Americans as victims.
When I won in 2008, 47% of the American people voted for John McCain. They didn't vote for me. And what I said on election night was, even though you didn't vote for me, I hear your voices, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to be your president. And one of the things I've learned as president is you represent the entire country. And when I meet Republicans, as I'm traveling around the country, they are hardworking, family people who care deeply about this country. And my expectation is that if you want to be president, you got to work for everybody, not just for some.
It all goes back to this video of a closed-door fundraiser in Florida in May that has sparked a new wave of criticism of Mitt Romney's gaffe-plagued presidential campaign and raised fresh questions about his ability to come from behind in the polls and win in November. In his response, Romney hastily called a news conference in Costa Mesa, California.
As I point out, I recognize that among those that pay no tax, approximately 47% of Americans, I'm not likely to be highly successful with a message of lowering taxes. That's not as attractive to those who don't pay income taxes as it is to those who do. And likewise, those who are reliant on government are not as attracted to my message of slimming down the size of government. And so I then focus on those individuals who I believe are most likely to be able to be pulled into my camp and help me win the 51 or 50.1% that I'd need to become the next president.
The video was shot with a hidden camera as Romney spoke to potential donors at a private event earlier this year. It was posted online on Monday by the liberal magazine Mother Jones. The video gave the Obama campaign a chance to return to a popular theme that the multimillionaire Romney is an out-of-touch elitist. A Reuters Ipsos survey on Monday taken over the previous 4 days showed Romney trailing Obama by 5 percentage points.
EU's Foreign Affairs representative Catherine Ashton held talks with Iran's chief nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili in a bid to end the standoff over the Iranian nuclear program. The EU said the meeting in Istanbul, which ended early on Wednesday, was useful and constructive. Here's more.
Arab states said they had decided as a goodwill gesture to refrain from targeting Israel with a resolution over its assumed nuclear arsenal at the IAEA's annual assembly. The meeting between Ashton and Jalili in Istanbul over the dispute on Iran's nuclear drive marked the first direct talks since June.
It is Iran which represents the greatest threat to peace and security in the Middle East and beyond. No words in this room could distort the real facts behind Iran's drive to nuclear weapons. Pointing an accusing finger towards Israel will not change this somber reality.
Arab states have sharply criticized Israel and said they would not put forward a non-binding but symbolically important resolution calling on Israel to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and place all its atomic sites under IAEA oversight.
Its clandestine nuclear activities seriously threaten regional peace and security and endanger the non-proliferation regime.
Meanwhile, a day earlier on Wednesday, Iran's chief nuclear negotiator said he would await the outcome of European Union foreign policy chief Catherine Ashton's talks with the six world powers before he held more discussions with her.
A common frame should be set for future talks based on the common grounds agreed during technical talks following the meeting in Moscow.
6 world powers, the United States, Russia and China, plus 3 EU nations, France, Germany and Britain, have sought to persuade Iran to scale back its nuclear program through intensifying economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure. Ashton is expected to meet the 6 powers on the fringes of United Nations General Assembly ministerial meetings the coming week in New York.
Time for a short break. Some entertainment news awaits you in just a minute. Watch Lady Gaga doing what she does best. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
Prime Minister Antonis Samaras is in Rome to meet his counterpart Mario Monti. Samaras has met with several key Eurozone leaders over the past few weeks as he attempts to convince them to make changes to Greece's bailout program when European Union leaders meet on October 18th. The Italian government aims to cut the debt from 123.4% of GDP this year to 114.4% in 2015. Hundreds of activists of India's regional party VCK protested outside the Sri Lankan High Commission in Chennai on Friday, asking visiting President Mahinda Rajapaksa to go back. Over 500 pro-Tamil activists shouted slogans against Rajapaksa and the government, which allowed the Sri Lankan president to visit India. Minority Tamils have long complained of persecution by successive governments dominated by the Indian Ocean Islands, Sinhalese majority, since independence from Britain in 1948. The space shuttle Endeavour, carried piggyback atop a jumbo jet, landed at Edwards Air Force Base in California on Thursday at the tail end of a cross-country trip to Los Angeles to begin its final mission as a museum exhibit. NASA retired its shuttle fleet last year after completing the US portion of the $100 billion International Space Station. At least 54 people were killed and dozens wounded when an airstrike hit a fuel station in Syria's northern province of Al-Raqqa on Thursday. Amateur video uploaded to a social media website appeared to show the aftermath of the deadly blast in Al-Raqqa, with plumes of black smoke billowing into the sky. Wrecked cars could be seen lying amid the debris near what appears to be a petrol station.
And if you've missed the week's biggest sporting events, here's your chance to catch up. Watch Sports Action.
Veteran Australian opener Matthew Hayden has called time on his glittering playing career, opting not to play in Australia's domestic T20 series this year. His Brisbane Heat team said that after lengthy discussions, Hayden had opted not to return for a final series. Hayden, who retired from Test cricket in 2009, played for the Chennai Super Kings in the Indian Premier League in 2010. He took a sabbatical from cricket before returning to play for the Brisbane team in 2011-2012. Hayden said cricket would remain a significant part of his life. Juventus fought back from 2 goals down to earn a 2-2 draw with Chelsea in their Champions League clash in London on Wednesday. Chelsea's Oscar scored 2 goals in 2 minutes in the first half, the second a marvellous curling effort that gave Buffon no chance. Vidal capitalised on some slack Chelsea defending to make it 2-1 at the break, before substitute Quagliarella scored an equaliser in the 80th minute. Spain had Naranjito the Smiling Orange in 1982, France Futix the football-playing rooster in 98. Now Brazil have chosen an endangered armadillo as the mascot for the 2014 World Cup. FIFA said the mascot represented the 3-banded armadillo, an endangered species indigenous to Brazil. FIFA's mascot is yellow with green eyes and a blue shell, the colours of the Brazilian flag, and will be holding aloft a football.
Catch all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap. Actress Lindsay Lohan was arrested on Wednesday for leaving the scene of an accident after she struck a pedestrian on her way to a hotel in Lower Manhattan. Shortly before 2:30 a.m., Lohan drove her black Porsche Cayenne SUV into an alley between the Maritime Hotel and Dream Hotel on West 16th Street when her vehicle clipped a 34-year-old man. She was arrested when she left the hotel a short time later, charged with a misdemeanor and released. The man who said his knee was injured was in stable condition at Bellevue Hospital. Lady Gaga stole the show in a floral headpiece at Philippe Treacy's London Fashion Week presentation on Sunday. The eccentric songstress is famed for her outlandish ensembles and she lived up to her reputation. Later, wearing her hot pink shroud, Gaga also stole the show when she opened her friend Treacy's Michael Jackson-themed comeback show. Designer Christopher Bailey sent his models down the runway in an explosion of rainbow-colored metallic trench coats as part of his latest spring-summer collection for Burberry. Models strode the catwalk in corsets, pencil skirts and sleek silk dresses in raspberry pinks, emerald greens and sapphire blues laced with a metallic edge. Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena walked the red carpet Monday night in Los Angeles for the premiere of their new police drama End of Watch. Set in South Central Los Angeles, the film has generated a buzz ahead of its opening for its realistic, gritty and honorable story about those who lost their job to serve and protect. End of Watch opens in the US on September 21st. That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates from us. This week, we wrap up celebrating United Nations World Peace Day, which was celebrated on Friday. Singer Elton John headlined the concert in London, accompanied on stage by actor Jude Law and pop star James Morrison. Goodbye and thanks for watching.
We'll find our parents down in the street to find a right on who runs. Catch me on round and heavy, seen them, yeah. Up at the dust break, blah, 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 blah.